"Who the hell is she?" The general's voice echoed through the command tent, his face contorting with shock as he spotted the hidden medal dangling from her neck. The revelation sent ripples of confusion through the entire camp, upending everything they thought they knew about their newest recruit. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across the ballroom as whispers replaced the elegant symphony. Clara Duval had vanished. One moment, she had been engaging in polite conversation near the champagne fountain. The next, gone, as if she had dissolved into the perfumed air. General Theodore Hargrave's weathered face remained impassive, but his eyes darted across the room with military precision. "Secure all exits," he murmured to his chief of security. Quietly, "I don't want to alarm the other guests." The security team moved with practiced discretion, positioning themselves at doorways while maintaining an air of casual vigilance. Diplomats and military officials continued their conversations, oblivious to the silent manhunt unfolding around them. All that remained of Clara's presence was a half-eaten canapé on a crystal plate and the lingering scent of lavender that seemed to mock the general's efforts. "Sir, she's completely vanished," reported a young officer returning from the perimeter check. "The guards at every exit swear nobody matching her description has left the building." Hargrave's jaw tightened. "Check the security footage, now." Across the ballroom, theories multiplied like ripples in a pond. "I heard she's a diplomat's mistress," whispered a woman in emerald silk to her companion. No, countered an elderly attaché, clearly a journalist who snuck in to expose something scandalous. A silver-haired ambassador leaned toward his colleague. "That woman seemed familiar. Wasn't she at the Geneva conference last spring?" While the speculation flourished, Hargrave retreated to a quiet anteroom where his aides had already retrieved the complete guest list. His fingers, steady despite decades of battlefield stress, traced down the elegant paper until they found the name, Clara Duval, Cultural Attaché, French Embassy. "Run a complete background check," he ordered, circling the name with his fountain pen. "And get me everything on her credentials. I want to know how she got that invitation." The general's mind kept returning to that moment, the flash of silver against her collarbone, partially hidden by lace, the Athena medal. Impossible. Those medals had been destroyed, along with all records of the division's existence. "Sir?" His aide's voice pulled him back to the present. "Should we alert other agencies?" Hargrave shook his head. "Not yet. This stays contained until I understand what we're dealing with." He stared at the name on the paper, determination hardening his features. Whoever Clara Duval truly was, she possessed something that shouldn't exist, and Hargrave would not rest until he uncovered the truth behind the woman and her forbidden medal. Captain Elise Moreno stood in the now empty ballroom, her sharp eyes scanning the polished floor where Clara Duval had last been seen. The military investigator's reputation preceded her. At 34, she had solved cases that had stumped veterans twice her age. General Theodore Hargrave had personally requested her for this assignment, a fact that both honored and unsettled her. "The guest list has been verified, Captain," said a junior officer, handing her a tablet. Her credentials were impeccable. Diplomatic clearance, background checks, everything. Elise nodded curtly, taking the device. "Too impeccable," she muttered. She scrolled through Clara's documentation, noting the perfect paper trail that somehow left no real trace of the woman herself. 20 years in military intelligence had taught her that perfection was often the most obvious sign of deception. The captain moved methodically through the venue, interviewing staff and security personnel. A waiter recalled serving the mysterious woman champagne. A guard remembered her polite smile as she presented her invitation. Yet no one could explain how she had vanished so completely, slipping past 4 security checkpoints without triggering a single alarm. "Show me the security footage again," she instructed the head of security, who complied with visible discomfort. They watched as Clara moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her interactions brief but calculated. Then, during a momentary camera blackout, just 3 seconds, she disappeared. Not coincidence, Elise said firmly. She knew exactly when to move. As the captain traced Clara's escape route through a service corridor, she found herself inexplicably drawn to this case. Something about the woman's confident posture, the way she carried herself. It triggered a strange familiarity that Elise couldn't place. Back in her temporary office at headquarters, she spread the evidence before her. A partial fingerprint, a strand of hair, the guest list with Clara Duval's name underlined in red. The woman was a ghost, yet Elise felt a peculiar connection to her, as though chasing a shadow from her own past. General Hargrave entered without knocking. "What have you found?" he asked, his voice betraying more tension than the situation seemed to warrant. "She's professional, sir, military trained, possibly intelligence background. This wasn't opportunistic. She came for something specific." The general's face hardened. "Find her, Captain, whatever it takes." As he left, Elise returned to the evidence, sensing that this investigation would lead her into dangerous territory. The medal Clara had worn, barely visible in the security footage, nagged at her consciousness. Something about this case filled a void she hadn't known existed, like a missing puzzle piece she'd never realized was lost. "Who are you?" she whispered to the grainy image on her screen. "And why do I feel like I should already know?" General Theodore Hargrave sat alone in his dimly lit Pentagon office, staring at the classified file labeled Athena Division, decommissioned. The weight of decades pressed down on his shoulders as he traced the embossed seal with weathered fingers. The medal around Clara Duval's neck shouldn't exist. Every last one had been destroyed when the division was disbanded, or so he had been told. The general picked up his secure phone and dialed a number few had access to. "I need everything we have on Athena," he said quietly. "The complete archives, not the sanitized version." His request sent ripples through the intelligence community. By morning, 3 senior officials had called to express concern about his inquiry. A deputy secretary even suggested during lunch that some old wars are better left unexamined. Hargrave recognized the warning for what it was. "Curious timing for spring cleaning," he muttered the following day, finding his request officially denied and several key files mysteriously misplaced from the archives. The bureaucratic stonewalling only strengthened his resolve. If they were this determined to bury Athena, something significant remained hidden. That evening, Hargrave found an unmarked envelope on his desk. Inside was a single photograph, his granddaughter at her university campus, with a handwritten note, "Some legacies are better left forgotten." The threat was unmistakable, turning his blood cold before igniting a fury he hadn't felt in years. He locked his office door and pulled out a worn leather journal from his personal safe. The military man had kept his own records, names and dates carefully documented throughout his career. Trust no system completely, a lesson learned through painful experience. "What were you really doing, Clara?" he whispered, connecting dates and locations from his personal records. The pattern emerging disturbed him deeply. Athena's operations had extended far beyond their official mandate, and the woman wearing that medal was at the center of it all. His secure phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Vienna, Café Mozart. The pianist knows." Hargrave's conscience, worn thin by years of compromise and political maneuvering, would not allow him to walk away. Too many good people had disappeared under the banner of national security. Too many questions remained unanswered. He booked a flight to Vienna under a civilian alias, knowing full well he was crossing a line that could end his career, or worse. But the medal around Clara's neck had awakened something in him, a determination to face the truth, no matter how ugly or dangerous it proved to be. The dust-laden air of Prague's outskirts carried the sound of crumbling concrete as workers dismantled the forgotten military outpost. The Soviet-era building had stood abandoned for decades, its secrets locked within cracked walls that had witnessed the Cold War's silent battles. Merrick, the demolition foreman, nearly missed it, a hollow sound when his hammer struck what should have been solid concrete. "Stop everything!" he shouted, waving his arms frantically. The workers froze as Merrick carefully chiseled around the peculiar section of wall. Behind the false panel lay a small metal box, untouched by time in its concrete tomb. Captain Elise Moreno arrived within hours of being notified, her military credentials granting immediate access to the site. The young investigator's dark eyes narrowed as she slipped on latex gloves before handling the weathered container. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact, filled with meticulous handwriting and detailed sketches. When exactly was this outpost last operational? She asked the site manager, who shrugged and mentioned something about the late 80s. Back in her temporary quarters, Elise spread the journal across her desk. The pages revealed an intricate mixture of tactical diagrams, troop movements, extraction points, and what appeared to be coded meeting locations, interspersed with surprisingly intimate sketches of faces and landscapes. Each entry was dated, but encrypted in a cipher she couldn't immediately recognize. At the bottom of several pages, 2 initials appeared in elegant script, CD. Those letters triggered something in Elise's mind, a fleeting familiarity she couldn't place. She traced the initials with her fingertip, feeling an inexplicable connection to the unknown author. Throughout the night, Elise photographed each page, uploading them to her encrypted device before forwarding select images to General Hargrave. His response came swiftly: "Secure the journal. Tell no one. Return immediately." The urgency in his message only deepened her curiosity. As dawn broke over Prague, Elise finally surrendered to exhaustion, falling into a troubled sleep at her desk. In her dreams, the sketches from the journal came alive, faces morphing into one another, landscapes shifting between Vienna and Istanbul, and a woman's silhouette always vanishing around corners just before Elise could reach her. She woke with a start, the initials CD echoing in her mind. Clara Duval, the mysterious woman from the gala. The connection crystallized with sudden clarity, sending Elise bolt upright in her chair. The journal wasn't just evidence. It was a personal chronicle, perhaps the key to unraveling who Clara Duval truly was, and why she wore a medal that made General Theodore Hargrave turn pale. The Viennese café sat nestled between 2 antiquated buildings, its windows fogged with the breath of secrets. Clara Duval adjusted her scarf, the weight of the hidden medal against her chest, a constant reminder of her purpose. The establishment was nearly empty, perfect for what she needed. In the corner booth sat Marcus Reitman, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup. The retired intelligence analyst had aged considerably since she'd pulled him from that burning embassy in Bucharest 15 years ago. His eyes, however, remained sharp as they tracked her approach. "I never thought I'd see you again," he murmured as Clara slid into the seat across from him. "The dead rarely make social calls." "And yet here we are," she replied, ordering an espresso with a subtle gesture to the waiter. "I need information only you would know." Marcus leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "They're looking for you." "After that stunt at the gala with Hargrave?" "I didn't plan that encounter," Clara interrupted, "but I need to know about the archives." The old man's face paled. "Those were destroyed during the purge. Everyone knows that." "We both know better," she countered, sliding a small photograph across the table. A younger version of herself, standing beside Marcus and 3 others, all wearing the same medal she now kept hidden. The analyst sighed, defeat etching deeper lines into his face. "The truth is, they were never destroyed. The complete Athena Division archives were hidden. Under your birth name, Clara, your real name." She absorbed this revelation with practiced stillness, though her mind raced. The archives contained everything: operations, agents, methods. In the wrong hands, they would be catastrophic. "Why my name?" she asked. "Because no one would look there. Clara Duval died officially 20 years ago. Your birth identity was scrubbed even before that. The waiter delivered her espresso, and she took a measured sip, buying time to process. The clock was ticking. General Hargrave would already be mobilizing resources, and her former protégé might be closer than she thought. "I need to move quickly," she said, memorizing the location details Marcus discreetly passed to her. "Thank you for this." "Be careful," he warned. "You're not just running from Hargrave. There are others, powerful people who want those archives buried forever." Clara left enough euros to cover both their drinks and slipped away, the scent of lavender lingering briefly. Outside, she merged with the evening crowd, just another tourist in Vienna's elegant streets. She had allies and enemies in equal measure now, and distinguishing between them would only get harder. Time was running out. Clara needed to stay invisible in a world that hunted its own ghosts. And she was perhaps the most dangerous ghost of all. Captain Elise Moreno spread the documents across her desk, frowning at the inconsistencies that seemed to multiply with each passing hour. The official records on Clara Duval were riddled with contradictions. Birth dates that didn't align, service records with suspicious gaps, and photographs that somehow never quite captured the woman's full face. "This doesn't add up," she muttered, pinning another surveillance photo to her evidence board. The military investigator had built her career on attention to detail, but this case was unraveling in ways that felt disturbingly personal. As she cross-referenced the timeline, Elise's hand froze over a date that had haunted her for 23 years, the night of the storm when her mother had supposedly been swept away. The official report claimed her body was never recovered, but something about Clara's movements in Vienna matched her mother's habits with uncanny precision. The lavender scent, the way she held her champagne glass, even the slight tilt of her head when listening. Elise pulled her personal file from her desk drawer, something General Hargrave had advised against. "Keep your professional distance," he had warned, his eyes not quite meeting hers. Now she wondered if her mentor had been protecting the investigation or protecting her from it. Her smartphone buzzed with a message from the forensics team. The DNA results from the half-eaten canapé had come back inconclusive, deliberately contaminated, they suspected. Another dead end engineered by someone who knew exactly how to disappear. Rain pelted against the window of her temporary office as memories surfaced. Her father's tight-lipped silence whenever she asked about her mother. The mysterious packages that arrived on her birthdays with no return address. The bedtime stories about a woman warrior who fought invisible battles. What if she didn't die? Elise whispered to the empty room. What if she chose to leave? The thought burned like acid. If Clara Duval was her mother, then her entire life had been built on an elaborate lie. Every medal she'd earned, every oath she'd sworn to uphold, all of it suddenly felt hollow. She traced her finger over the encrypted journal recovered from Prague, the initials CD, mocking her. The tactical diagrams reminded her of the doodles her mother used to make while helping with homework. Elise closed the file and stared at her reflection in the darkened window. Her loyalty to the military had been absolute, her sense of duty unquestioning. But now, faced with the possibility that the mysterious woman with the forbidden medal might be her own mother, everything she believed about family, duty, and truth began to crumble. The captain reached for her coat. There was only one person who might have answers, General Theodore Hargrave himself. Clara Duval moved through the Brussels diplomatic summit with practiced ease. Her silver-streaked hair swept into an elegant chignon that complemented her assumed identity as cultural attaché Marguerite Renaud. The Belgian security detail barely glanced at her credentials, forged with the precision that had once made her legendary within the Athena division. The grand hall of the European Parliament buzzed with multilingual conversations, champagne flutes clinking as deals were brokered between smiling faces. She recognized several diplomats from her previous life. Older now, with more medals and less hair, but the same calculating eyes. None recognized her. Fascinating speech on cybersecurity, Minister, she murmured to a Swiss official, her accent flawlessly neutral. The conversation was merely a cover as her eyes tracked three men meeting in the corner. Representatives from defense contractors whose names appeared in the encrypted journal. Clara excused herself gracefully, drifting closer to the trio. Their hushed tones carried just enough for her trained ear to catch fragments. Operation Blacklight. Reactivation protocols. The old methods worked best. Her blood chilled. Blacklight had been the code name for Athena's most controversial program, the one she had helped dismantle at great personal cost. Now these men spoke of reviving it as casually as discussing the weather. She slipped into an adjacent meeting room, quickly accessing a computer terminal with a security bypass she'd memorized decades ago. The files confirmed her fears, a proposal to resurrect covert operations using Athena's playbook, complete with the same brutal enhanced interrogation techniques that had left so many operatives broken or dead. The former operative downloaded the evidence onto a microchip disguised as a brooch, her fingers steady despite the storm of emotions within. These men had learned nothing from history, her history. Returning to the reception, Clara lifted a crystal flute in a silent toast toward the oblivious diplomats. The irony wasn't lost on her. These men and women debated transparency and human rights, while darkness festered beneath their polished shoes. Her mission crystallized with terrible clarity. The Athena Division's ghosts could not be allowed to rise again, even if it meant stepping from the shadows, even if it meant risking everything she'd built since disappearing. As she set down her untouched champagne, Clara caught sight of her reflection in the window. Behind the carefully constructed facade, she glimpsed the woman she once was, the one who had sworn never to let power operate unchecked in the darkness. Some promises transcended time and identity. Some debts could never be fully paid. Captain Elise Moreno rubbed her tired eyes as the classified surveillance footage flickered on the secure terminal. 3 days of calling in favors and borderline insubordination had finally paid off. The timestamp showed the recording was from Istanbul, barely 2 years ago. The grainy black and white video showed a crowded marketplace. Elise leaned closer, scanning each passing figure until she spotted her, a woman in a headscarf, moving with calculated precision through the throng. Though the quality was poor, the investigator recognized the distinctive posture and movement pattern that matched Clara Duval's file. "Impossible," Elise whispered, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. According to every official record, her mother had vanished 20 years ago, presumed dead after a mission gone wrong. Yet here she was, very much alive. The footage continued as Clara approached a small cafe. A tense exchange occurred with 2 men in suits before she smoothly escorted a terrified-looking man through the back exit. The hostage, clearly a high-value target, followed her instructions without hesitation, trusting this stranger with his life. Elise replayed the sequence 4 times, studying every movement. The woman on screen moved with the same efficiency that General Hargrave had praised in his stories about the Athena Division. The same grace Elise herself had been told she inherited. Her smartphone buzzed with a message from Hargrave. Any progress? Elise ignored it, downloading the footage to her encrypted device. The general had kept too many secrets already. She cross-referenced the date with international incidents. A Turkish scientist had mysteriously reappeared after a suspected kidnapping that same week. No explanation given, no ransom paid. The official report claimed he had simply returned on his own. Elise's hands trembled slightly as she shut down the terminal. The medal, the journal, and now this footage, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed until days ago. Her mother wasn't just alive. She was still operating, still rescuing people from the shadows. The military investigator gathered her notes, a new determination hardening within her. For 20 years, she had believed herself an orphan, had built her career on the foundation of that loss. Now everything had changed. "I will find you," she promised the frozen image on her screen. The woman who had abandoned her, who wore a medal no one should possess, who moved through the world like a ghost, leaving only whispers and lavender in her wake. Whatever the cost, whatever the truth, Elise would track down Clara Duval and demand answers face to face. The scent of lavender lingered in the air, faint but distinctive. Captain Elise Moreno paused, inhaling deeply as the familiar fragrance triggered something in her memory. It wasn't just any lavender. This was a specific blend, one she'd caught traces of at the Vienna Gala and again at the train station. Clara Duval had left behind more than just questions. She'd left a signature scent that was now becoming her undoing. Following this ethereal trail led Elise to a narrow cobblestone street in Marseille, where a small apothecary nestled between a bakery and an antique bookshop. The bell above the door announced her arrival with a gentle chime. Inside, the shop was a sanctuary of glass bottles and dried herbs, the air heavy with competing fragrances. "May I help you?" asked an elderly man, his hands stained with plant oils and his eyes sharp despite his age. Elise produced a small vial she'd recovered from the Vienna scene. "I'm looking for information about this perfume." The proprietor's expression shifted subtly. "Ah, Lavande Nocturne, a custom blend. Not many request this particular combination." "Someone did, though," Elise pressed, watching his reaction carefully. The old man hesitated. "A woman, yes, very particular about the formula. Paid in cash, never left a name." He adjusted his spectacles, but she carried herself like someone accustomed to being noticed and then forgotten. Military, perhaps, or intelligence. "When was she last here?" Elise kept her tone casual, though her heart raced. 3 days ago. Purchased her usual blend." He paused, then added, "She left something for safekeeping as well. Said someone might come asking." From beneath the counter, he produced a receipt, yellowed and creased. On the back, a series of numbers and letters that appeared random to the untrained eye. But Elise recognized a basic cipher immediately. Back in her hotel room, the military investigator decoded the message within minutes. Coordinates, an address, Clara's safe house, hidden in plain sight in the old quarter of Marseille. The cat-and-mouse game was accelerating. From Prague to Vienna, Brussels to Istanbul, and now Marseille, their paths were drawing closer in ever-tightening circles. Elise knew she was being led, perhaps even manipulated, by a woman who had spent decades evading capture. Yet something about the deliberate breadcrumbs troubled her. Why would someone so skilled at disappearing leave such obvious traces? The lavender wasn't carelessness, it was invitation. As night fell over the Mediterranean port, Elise prepared her weapon and studied the safe house location. Tomorrow she would confront the woman behind the medal. The woman who might hold answers to questions Elise had carried her entire life. The chase was nearing its end. But whose trap would spring first remained to be seen. The Vienna apartment smelled of coffee and old books, a haven from the world outside. Clara Duval knocked 3 times, paused, then twice more, their old signal. When the door opened, she found herself face to face with Anton Bauer, his pianist's hands now weathered but still elegant. 20 years, he whispered, studying her face. "You haven't changed." "Liar," Clara smiled, stepping inside. The apartment was exactly as she remembered, shelves overflowing with musical scores and cryptography texts, a grand piano dominating the living room. Anton gestured toward the journal she carried. "Is that what brought you back to me after all this time?" "Not just the journal," she admitted. "I needed someone I could trust." They worked through the night, Anton's decryption skills still razor-sharp despite retirement. The pianist moved between the journal and his computer, occasionally playing fragments of Bach when stuck on particularly difficult codes. His thinking music, she remembered. "The final mission," he murmured. hours into their work. It wasn't just about extracting those scientists, was it? Clara shook her head. The Athena division was created to protect them and their work. When the division was compromised, I had to ensure their research wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. Research that could change warfare forever, Anton said, not as a question. Research that should never see the light of day, she corrected. As dawn approached, they decrypted the final pages. Clara's shoulders sagged with the weight of confirmation. The scientists were still alive, their work preserved but hidden. The journal contained coordinates, names, and protocols for contacting them if needed. Anton closed the journal gently. "I've been writing my memoirs," he confessed. "I've never mentioned you or Athena, but sometimes I wonder if the truth deserves to be known." Clara moved to the window, watching Vienna awaken. And how many would die for that truth? His reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. Some truths are worth dying for. But are they worth killing for? She asked. Anton's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with familiar ease. The touch spoke of decades of unspoken regrets and what-ifs. "Stay," he said simply. "You know I can't." The former codebreaker nodded, resignation in his eyes. "Your daughter? She's looking for you." Clara turned, surprise evident on her face. "Military investigator Captain Moreno. She has your determination," he explained. "I recognized her from the photographs you used to carry." Clara's expression softened. Elise was always stubborn. "Like her mother," Anton smiled sadly. "What'll you do when she finds you?" "Not if," Clara noted. "When. Some reunions can't be avoided forever," he said, returning to his piano and playing the melancholy piece he'd composed for her years ago. The bustling Vienna train station hummed with activity as Captain Elise Moreno spotted her target through the crowd. Clara Duvall stood near Platform 3, elegant and composed in a tailored coat, seemingly oblivious to being watched. Elise's heart hammered against her ribs as 28 years of questions surged through her mind. "Clara Duvall?" Elise called out, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. The older woman turned, her eyes widening with recognition. For a moment, time stood still. Mother and daughter faced each other across the concourse, strangers connected by blood and separated by secrets. Clara's lips parted to speak, but the words never came. Instead, a sharp crack echoed through the station as a bullet shattered the glass panel behind them. Clara dove forward, tackling Elise to the ground as panicked travelers scattered in all directions. The military investigator felt the rush of air as another bullet passed inches from her head. "Stay down," Clara hissed, pulling Elise behind a concrete pillar. "He's in the clock tower, northeast corner." Elise stared at the woman who had abandoned her as a child. "Who's trying to kill you?" "Anton Resnick," Clara replied, checking her concealed weapon. "My former protege. He believes I betrayed the division." Screams erupted as another shot ricocheted off the floor. Security guards rushed toward the commotion, but Clara grabbed Elise's arm. "We can't stay here. There's an exit through the maintenance tunnels." "Why should I trust you?" Elise demanded, even as she followed her mother through the chaos. "Because right now, I'm the only one who can keep you alive," the older operative responded, her eyes scanning for threats as they slipped through a service door. In the dimly lit tunnel, Clara paused to check Elise for injuries. The gesture, so maternal and unexpected, caught the captain off guard. 28 years of silence and now this," Elise whispered bitterly. Clara's face softened momentarily. "I never wanted you involved." "Well, I am involved," Elise countered, "and I need answers." A distant door slammed, echoing through the tunnel. Clara tensed, listening. "Answers will have to wait. He's coming." As they navigated the labyrinthine passageways beneath the station, an unspoken understanding formed between them. Whatever lay in their past, survival now depended on working together. Elise found herself instinctively matching her mother's movements. their military training creating an unexpected synchronicity. "We need to get to my safe house," Clara whispered. "The answers you want, they're dangerous, Elise." For the first time in her adult life, Elise saw uncertainty in her mother's eyes, and something else. Fear, not for herself, but for her daughter. General Theodore Hargrave's hands trembled as he reached for his medication, a new symptom he couldn't hide from Captain Elise Moreno. The military hospital room, sterile and quiet, felt like a confessional box as monitors beeped rhythmically in the background. "I don't have much time left," the general admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "My doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less." Elise leaned forward, her investigator's instincts momentarily overshadowed by compassion for her mentor. "Why tell me this now, sir?" "Because you deserve the truth about Clara Duval." Hargrave's eyes, once commanding, now held the weight of decades of secrets. "I served with her in the Athena division. We were colleagues, friends even." The revelation hit Elise like a physical blow. "You knew my mother all along?" "When she disappeared, I buried her file, redacted her existence." The old man's confession came between labored breaths. "I protected my career, at the expense of her legacy, at the expense of your childhood." Elise paced the small room, her world tilting on its axis. The system she had devoted her life to, the military code she lived by, suddenly seemed built on quicksand. Her mentor had participated in erasing her own mother's existence. "Why come clean now?" she demanded. "Because they're coming for her again." Hargrave gestured weakly toward his smartphone on the bedside table. "Messages from the Joint Chiefs. Pressure from intelligence directors. They want Clara silenced permanently." Outside the hospital window, rain began to fall, mirroring the storm in Elise's mind. The general continued, his voice growing urgent despite his weakness. "There's a faction within our government that can't afford her testimony. The privatization of Athena would implicate too many powerful people." In the following paragraph, "By the people who want someone to make maximum progress, suddenly they get a mild infection you never want." Elise's training kicked in. "Names, I need names. In my apartment behind the painting of Prague, a safe with everything I've gathered." Hargrave reached for her hand. "I'm caught between my oath and my conscience, Elise, but you aren't." A nurse entered, checking the general's vitals with practiced efficiency. The interruption gave Elise a moment to process the betrayal, both old and new. When they were alone again, Hargrave looked at her with unexpected vulnerability. "Your mother was extraordinary. The medal she wears, she earned it saving lives when everyone else was counting bodies." Elise stood, her decision made. "I'll find her before they do. They're watching me, watching you too." The general closed his eyes, exhaustion claiming him. "Choose carefully who you trust." As Elise left the hospital, she felt the weight of impossible choices ahead. Her loyalty to the military clashed with her growing need to protect a mother she barely knew. The stakes had never been higher, for Clara, for Hargrave, and for herself. The pages of the decrypted journal trembled in Elise Moreno's hands as the truth finally emerged from decades of silence. What she had believed was merely an espionage operation, perhaps even treason, was revealed as something far more noble. Clara Duval's final mission with the Athena division hadn't been about stealing secrets, but saving lives. "They were taken from 6 different countries," Elise whispered, scanning the handwritten notes. "Physicists, chemists, engineers, all vanished within 3 months." The pianist nodded gravely as he pointed to a series of coordinates in the margins. "Your mother led the extraction team personally." The scientists were developing technology that could revolutionize warfare, weapons that could target specific genetic markers, drones smaller than insects, surveillance systems that could read thoughts. Elise felt a chill run through her body. The journal detailed how Clara had orchestrated a rescue operation across 3 continents, extracting 17 scientists from captivity before their work could be weaponized. The mission had been unauthorized, a rogue operation that violated international agreements and diplomatic protocols. The division was ordered to stand down, the pianist explained, his fingers tracing the faded ink. But Clara refused. She knew what would happen if those inventions fell into the wrong hands. The journal contained sketches of extraction routes, safe houses, and contingency plans, all meticulously detailed in her mother's precise handwriting. But it was the personal notes that struck Elise most deeply. The moral calculations, the weight of decisions that could save millions while condemning the operatives to lives of secrecy and exile. What happened to them? The scientists? Elise asked. New identities, scattered across the world. Their research remains classified even now, too dangerous to destroy, too volatile to use. The pianist closed the journal gently. Your mother ensured they would never be forced to create weapons again. Elise stared at a photograph tucked between the pages, 17 frightened faces, and her mother standing protectively beside them. The cost of that rescue became clear. Clara's disappearance, the dissolution of the Athena division, and 20 years of living as a ghost. She sacrificed everything, Elise murmured. Including you, the pianist added softly. Perhaps her greatest regret. As Elise tucked the journal into her jacket, she felt the weight of its secrets pressing against her heart. She was no longer just investigating a case. She was inheriting a legacy of impossible choices and shadowy debts. With each step deeper into her mother's world, Elise understood more clearly why some medals remained hidden beneath lace and why some heroes vanished into whispers. The manila folder landed on the safe house table with a dull thud. Captain Elise Moreno stared at the photograph inside, a man with salt and pepper hair, sitting at a cafe in Zurich reading a newspaper. A man who should have been 20 years dead. That's impossible, she whispered, her fingers trembling as they traced the outline of his face. My father died when I was 7. Clara Duval's expression remained carefully neutral. Martin is very much alive. He's been living as Heinrich Weber for the past 20 years. The revelation hit Elise like physical pain. Her father, alive all this time while she had laid flowers on an empty grave every year. The military investigator felt her world tilting sideways. Everything she believed about her childhood suddenly cast in shadow. You let me believe he was dead, Elise said, her voice dangerously quiet. You let me mourn him. It was the price of keeping him safe, Clara replied. When the Athena division was compromised, they would have used him to get to me, to get to the archive. She paused, watching her daughter's face. The intelligence agencies agreed to protect him if I disappeared and kept silent about what I knew. Elise paced the small room, her mind racing through childhood memories, now tainted with doubt. The mysterious phone calls her mother would take in the middle of the night, the unexplained absences, the way she would sometimes catch her mother staring at old photographs with an expression that seemed more like guilt than grief. Does he know about me, that I'm alive? Elise asked. Yes, Clara said softly. But contact would have exposed you both. The revelation reframed everything Elise understood about her mother's abandonment. What she had interpreted as cold betrayal had been, perhaps, the most painful form of protection. Yet the decades of lies created a chasm that compassion alone couldn't bridge. I could have helped protect him, Elise said, her voice breaking. We could have faced it together. You were a child, Clara replied. And later, you became a military investigator, the very system I was hiding from. Elise studied the surveillance photos, noting how her father's eyes still crinkled when he smiled, just as she remembered. A glimmer of hope flickered beneath her anger. Her father was out there, breathing the same air, living a life parallel to her own. When this is over, Elise said, carefully replacing the photograph in the folder. I want to see him. Clara nodded, but her eyes held a warning. First, we need to make sure there's an after for any of us. Elise closed the folder, her resolve hardening. She saw her mother's choices in a new light. but trusted her less than ever. The headlines flashed across every major news outlet in Brussels. Former spy accused of selling secrets. Clara Duval stared at her tablet, watching her carefully constructed world crumble around her. The fabricated scandal had appeared overnight, meticulously crafted documents suggesting she had betrayed her country decades ago, selling classified information to foreign powers. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to discredit her before her testimony. In her safe house, Clara closed the blinds and checked her encrypted device for the third time that hour. Former colleagues who had promised support were now unreachable. Even the retired intelligence analyst from Vienna had gone dark after sending one final message: "They're watching everyone connected to you." At military headquarters, Captain Elise Moreno faced her own storm. Colleagues who once sought her company now found reasons to eat lunch elsewhere. Her superior officer had suggested she take administrative leave, a thinly veiled attempt to distance the department from the scandal. The daughter of a suspected traitor couldn't be trusted with sensitive information, they implied without saying. "Captain, my office." General Theodore Hargrave called, his voice carrying across the bullpen. The aging officer closed the door behind her, his face drawn with concern. "They're trying to isolate you," he said quietly. "Just as they're isolating her." "I know the playbook," Elise replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Discredit the witness, then discredit anyone who supports them." The general nodded. "The tribunal starts in 3 days. They're desperate." That evening, Elise found a small package in her mailbox, a book of poetry with certain letters underlined on specific pages. She spent hours decoding the message, a skill her mother had taught her through their recent correspondence. The completed message revealed a meeting location and time. At a quiet corner of a public park, mother and daughter sat on separate benches, never acknowledging each other directly. "They'll use your father against you next," Clara murmured, pretending to read a newspaper. "They know about him." Elise tensed, but maintained her casual posture. "Let them try. We need to coordinate our testimony," Clara continued. "The archive contains proof that will counter their narrative, but we must be precise about what we reveal." As they finalized their strategy through coded phrases and casual gestures, Elise realized how much she had come to respect this woman she barely knew. Despite the professional isolation and personal attacks, a strange certainty had settled in her heart. For the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting alone. Clara stood to leave, dropping a small piece of paper that Elise would retrieve moments later. 3 days, she said to no one in particular. Then the world will know the truth about Athena. The Brussels tribunal chamber fell into a charged silence as Clara Duval approached the witness stand. 40 years of secrets weighed on her shoulders, yet she moved with the same quiet grace that had once made her legendary among operatives. The packed gallery watched, a sea of diplomats, journalists, and intelligence officials from 3 continents, all drawn to this unprecedented moment of revelation. "Please state your name for the record," the tribunal chair requested. "Clara Duval, former field commander of the Athena Division," she replied, her voice steady despite the collective gasp that rippled through the chamber. It was the first public acknowledgement of the division's existence by any of its members. For the next 2 hours, Clara methodically dismantled decades of carefully constructed lies. She detailed operations across Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, missions that had shaped modern geopolitics while remaining absent from history books. The woman spoke without notes, each date and location delivered with unwavering precision. The division was never disbanded, Clara testified, her eyes briefly meeting General Hargraves across the chamber. It was privatized, its assets transferred to corporate entities owned by the very officials who claimed to have shut it down. In the gallery, Elise watched her mother with a complex mixture of pride and apprehension. The captain had secured this hearing through back channels, risking her career to ensure Clara's testimony would be heard by those who couldn't bury it. Now, as Clara named names, former ministers, generals, and intelligence directors, Elise understood the true scope of what they'd uncovered. These individuals profited from the division's continued operations while publicly denying its existence, Clara continued, placing a sealed folder on the table before her. This contains financial records proving the diversion of government funds into private accounts. The tribunal members exchanged troubled glances as the evidence mounted. Representatives from 3 nations requested emergency consultations with their governments. A French diplomat abruptly excused himself, his face ashen. "Miss Duval," the tribunal chair asked, "why come forward now after all these years?" Clara's gaze swept the chamber, lingering briefly on her daughter. "Because silence has protected the wrong people for too long. Because those who served honorably deserve recognition. And because some truths cannot remain buried forever." As she stepped down from the stand, Clara knew there was no going back. Diplomatic cables were already flying between capitals. Alliances were shifting in real time. The reckoning had begun, and it would reshape the very institutions that had once abandoned her and her operatives. In the back of the chambers, the pianist watched silently, finally understanding why she had carried the weight of these secrets alone for so long. The tribunal chamber had emptied for the afternoon recess, leaving Clara Duval alone with her thoughts in the cavernous room. The morning's testimony had drained her, each revealed secret like pulling a bullet from an old wound. She stood by the tall windows, watching Brussels continue its ordinary day beyond the glass. The reflection showed him before she heard him. Anton Resnick, her most promising student from the Athena division, now her would-be executioner. He moved with the same precision she had once taught him. "You taught us never to hesitate," Anton said, his voice echoing in the empty chamber as he raised his handgun. "Yet you hesitated when it mattered most." Clara turned slowly. "Is that what you believe, Anton? That I abandoned our team?" "You left us to die in Istanbul," he snarled. 8 operatives captured while you escaped. 8 friends tortured because the great Clara Duval chose self-preservation. The doors burst open as Elise entered, weapon drawn. "Drop it," she commanded, her training taking over despite the shock of seeing her mother at gunpoint. "Your daughter?" Anton laughed bitterly. "How touching. She doesn't know what you sacrificed to save your own skin." Something changed in Clara's eyes. A cold fury replacing her usual composed demeanor. In one fluid motion, she disarmed Anton, twisting his arm with such practiced violence that Elise flinched at the sound of tendons straining. "I didn't escape," Clara hissed, pressing Anton against the wall. "I was captured first, tortured for 17 days before I broke free, and spent 3 months hunting down each team member." Her voice cracked. "I found 6 bodies, recovered 2 survivors, including you." Anton's face contorted. "Then why disappear? Why leave us wondering?" "Because the mission was compromised from within," Clara replied, her grip loosening slightly. "Someone sold us out, and I couldn't trust anyone until I knew who." Elise lowered her weapon, witnessing her mother's pain. Not just physical, but the weight of leadership that had haunted her for decades. The burden of choices where every option ends in loss. "You were my best student," Clara whispered, stepping back. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you." Security personnel flooded the room, restraining Anton. As they led him away, his eyes never left Clara's, anger giving way to confusion, then the first flicker of doubt. Mother and daughter stood alone in the aftermath, the silence between them different now. "How many more want you dead?" Elise asked quietly. Clara's smile was thin, fewer than yesterday. For the first time, Elise truly understood what her mother had carried alone all these years, not just secrets, but scars that would never fully heal. The truth hit like a thunderbolt. Huddled in the pianist's dimly lit apartment in Vienna, Clara Duval and Captain Elise Moreno pored over the decrypted files from the journal. The revelation was staggering. Athena Division had never been disbanded at all. They privatized it, Clara whispered, her finger tracing the coded financial transfers. They sold our network to the highest bidder. Elise leaned closer to the documents, spread across the antique coffee table. These contractors have been operating for decades, using Athena's infrastructure and contacts. Her voice hardened, and hunting down anyone who might expose them. The pianist brought them fresh coffee, his hands trembling slightly. The names on these boards of directors, government officials, military leaders from 6 countries, including General Hargrave, Elise added, the betrayal still raw. Her mentor had known more than he'd admitted. Clara stood and moved to the window, peering through the curtains at the rain-slicked streets below. I've been running from ghosts that were never ghosts at all. Just mercenaries with government contracts. The weight of understanding settled between mother and daughter. Clara wasn't just a woman with classified knowledge. She was living proof of an international conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. The archive is the key, Clara said, turning back to face them. It contains identification of every operative, every mission, every client. If we secure it, we can protect those still in danger. Elise finished. The military investigator had crossed a line she could never uncross, aligning herself with her mother against the very institutions she'd sworn to serve. They worked through the night, plotting access points to a remote data center in the Alps, where the digital archive was allegedly stored. The pianist decoded the final security protocols while mother and daughter prepared their equipment. We have 36 hours before they realize what we're doing, Clara warned, checking her weapon with practiced hands. Elise nodded, studying her mother's movements. And after we secure the archive, what then? Clara paused, meeting her daughter's gaze directly. Then we make a choice. Expose everything and watch the world burn, or use it as leverage to protect those still in the crosshairs. The pianist looked up from his computer. They'll never stop hunting you both. No, Clara agreed, a hint of her old determination flashing in her eyes. But for the first time in 40 years, we'll be the hunters, not the hunted. Mother and daughter exchanged a look of perfect understanding. The fate of countless operatives and their own futures hung in the balance. The race against time had begun. The diplomatic standoff unfolded in the grand hall of the Brussels tribunal chamber. Clara Duval stood in the shadows, watching as Elise was cornered by 3 men in tailored suits, representatives from the privatized Athena Division. Their hands rested casually near concealed weapons as they surrounded her daughter. Clara's mind raced through calculations. She could vanish now, disappear into the network of safe houses across Europe that had sheltered her for decades. The encrypted archive was secure. Her mission was technically complete. But as she watched Elise's composed face, Clara recognized the same steel she had once seen in her own reflection. "You have no idea what you're holding," one man whispered to Elise, his voice carrying across the marble floor. "Hand over the drive, Captain." Clara stepped forward, the lavender scent announcing her presence before her voice did. "She doesn't have it. I do." The chamber fell silent. Diplomats and security personnel froze, witnessing the confrontation. Clara approached with measured steps, her hands visible. The former operative moved with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. 20 years ago, you privatized justice, she addressed the men, her voice carrying to the assembled dignitaries. You turned patriots into mercenaries. Today that ends. She slid a small device across the polished table. The complete Athena archives, unredacted. Every operation, every compromise, every betrayal. One of the men lunged forward, but Elise intercepted him with practiced precision. Security personnel swarmed in, surrounding the group as Clara's evidence was secured by tribunal officials. Hours later, mother and daughter stood on a balcony overlooking the Brussels skyline. The night air carried the distant sounds of the city below. "You could stay," Elise said, not looking at her mother. "Testify. Build something new. Clara smiled faintly. Some ghosts should remain ghosts. The world needs your voice now, not mine. I spent my life looking for you, Elise whispered, finally turning to face the woman who had given her life, then disappeared from it. And I spent mine, making sure you could live yours. Clara touched her daughter's face gently. Some sacrifices leave scars that never heal. But they're worth making. They embraced 20 years of absence compressed into a single moment. Both women knew this reconciliation was real, but temporary. Clara would disappear again, not out of abandonment this time, but protection. The pianist asked about you, Elise said. Clara's eyes softened. Tell him I heard his latest composition. As dawn broke over Brussels, Clara was gone. But they're worth making. They embraced 20 years of absence compressed into a single moment. Both women knew this reconciliation was real, but temporary. Clara would disappear again, not out of abandonment this time, but protection, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and a silver medal on Elise's nightstand, a reminder of sacrifices made in shadow. The grand hall of the Brussels Tribunal Chamber buzzed with anticipation as Captain Elise Moreno approached the podium. 6 months had passed since the Athena Division revelations had rocked diplomatic circles across Europe. The young military investigator, now promoted for her exceptional work, smoothed her uniform and surveyed the assembled dignitaries. History remembers those who stand in the spotlight, Elise began, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. But true security rests on the shoulders of those who operate in darkness, carrying burdens we never see. Ambassadors and military attachés nodded solemnly as she continued her address on international cooperation and transparency. General Theodore Hargrave sat in the front row, his once commanding frame now slightly stooped, but his eyes clear and proud. The aging officer had weathered the political storm that followed the tribunal, choosing truth over comfort in his final years of service. As Elise spoke of sacrifice and duty, she noticed a subtle movement near the back entrance. A woman in an elegant gray suit and lavender scarf slipped quietly into the chamber. Clara Duval, or whatever name she was using now, stood partially concealed behind a marble column, her presence unnoticed by all except her daughter. Some heroes, Elise continued, her gaze momentarily locking with her mother's, carry no medals on their chests. Their honors remain as invisible as their service, known only to those who understand the true cost of peace. The former Athena operative's lips curved into a small smile, pride evident in her eyes. Clara had chosen exile once more after the tribunal, disappearing into the shadows of Europe rather than accepting the complicated freedom that might have followed her testimony. Her occasional appearances, always unexpected, always brief, had become precious moments for Elise. When the applause came, Elise watched her mother slip away as silently as she had arrived, leaving only the faint scent of lavender in her wake. The pianist, seated among the cultural attachés, caught Elise's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. He remained one of the few who maintained contact with Clara, a quiet guardian of her continued existence. Later, as Elise collected her notes, she found a small envelope beneath her speech folder. Inside was a vintage silver compass. No note, no explanation needed. The instrument pointed true north, just as Clara had finally guided her daughter toward truth. Some secrets would always remain between them, scars carried from a past that could never fully heal. Yet in the quiet acknowledgement of sacrifice, those scars had become something precious, badges of honor that shone brighter than any medal ever could.